Hello everybody, it's Chris Schmidt from Rocket Lasso and welcome to another What's New video for Cinema 4D. This time it's for Cinema 4D 2023.2, the second update for this version this year for Cinema 4D. Now there's lots of stuff to cover. First of all, no plugins broke, which is great, no updating there. And then we're going to be covering new features for Pyro, new features for Simulation Cloth, nodes. Lots of workflow has changed for nodes, which is really great. They're way easier to use. In addition to that, there's a redesign for the Commander, which is very powerful. I'm actually going to be using that all the time now. And also, there are new modeling tools, very procedural, so I'm excited to be showing those off. And I think they open up a lot of cool opportunities for motion graphics as well. Now, a couple things to mention. I'm going to be presenting for Maxon at NAB. I've got a presentation which is not built around the new features. I'm very excited for it. It's going to be a good one. Also, Rocket Lasso Live is back for Season 5, where every week I take questions live on Twitch and YouTube, where we just try and figure out questions about Cinema 4D in real time. So that's always very exciting. And as always, I've got a Patreon set up for Rocket Lasso. If you want to get access to the scene files that I show off in this video, that's a great place to get them and a great way of supporting Rocket Lasso. So without any further ado, let's dive right on into Cinema 4D 2023.2. The first thing we're going to be tackling is going to dramatically increase your workflow and speed everything up across the board, and that is the updated Commander. Now, the Commander's been in Cinema for a while now, but I've barely ever used it, mostly because I thought in tutorials and live streams it's a little more, it's less visual to show things off. I preferred going to a menu to find it, but I gotta say, as a workflow, this is so useful now that I think I'm just gonna have to start using it. Let's actually open it up by hitting Shift-C as always, and here's the Commander. The first thing to notice, in addition to all these lovely buttons, is it is giving us a context. Here's a general context, which means, anything might be happening. But if I were to mouse over, say, the Object Manager and hit Shift-C, you'll see that we're in the Object Manager context. If we go into Materials and open Shift-C here, you'll see we're in a Material context. You'll see that that will actually affect the priority of the different things that appear in the list. Let's tab over to 2023.1 and open up the Commander, and you're going to see that there's nothing here. All we have is being able to type in and then a clear out button. So as an example, let's try and find a material. So I'll search for the word red. I want a red material, but here you see only objects essentially, and commands that have the word red are appearing. Jumping into 2023.2, and we jump inside a Commander, type in the word red, and now we're going to see a bunch of different objects. But as we scroll down, we're going to start seeing materials. And going further and further, you'll see that there's just so many more things in this list. Eventually, we're getting objects that are having Redshift materials applied. And if I go further, we're going to start seeing images that are using the word red. So way more stuff is going on in here. But let's say I want to actually find a red material. Well, let's go to this drop down here, and we're going to see that we have a bunch of different modes that we can be in. These are specific categories we want to search. So in this case, I want to search for the word red, but only inside of materials. And suddenly, it's all the materials, no images, no models, just the materials that we can apply. Now, a bunch of handy information right out of the gate. You can see that we get a Redshift icon for Redshift materials. There's a download icon. There's a favorite to prioritize those in the search. And we also get this new Maxon 1 icon, where the subscriptions have enabled Maxon to create more content and things that get added to the assets browser every month. So those are bonuses that come along with the Maxon 1 subscription. Scrolling up to the top, let's say I only want to search for Redshift materials. Well, you can click this drop down here, and you're going to see we get a whole bunch of additional information. This is all stuff from the asset browser, but there are some new categories, including we can go to other, and I can say I would like to search just for certain dependencies, and having done that, you'll see the word dependency and then some highlighted text. So you replace that text, I'll say a dependency of Redshift, and now only Redshift materials are applying for me that have the word red. So with that open, let's find a metal aluminum. That looks pretty good. I'll click to download that. It is now downloaded, so I can drag that directly onto my model. It gets brought into the scene, applied on top of my model, and is just ready to go. Now let's start doing some more practical things with this. Let's say that I've got my main floor object here and I've messed it up and it's a weird position. I want to reset it. With the way the button got moved, you have to open up this twirl down and you can find your reset transform button, which used to be called reset PSR, which was what I'm used to. That's the way it will always be in my brain. You have to do a couple clicks to get to that. But now instead I could Shift-C for the Commander, make sure we're in all, and let's search not for reset transform, but let's search PSR. There's now metadata put onto the reset transform, so I can just search PSR, hit enter, and instantly get my reset. So again, let's do that. Shift C, just type in PSR, enter, and instantly that'll reset to 0. So I'll be using that all the time. Let's continue with some more practical things. I shall select our text object here, and let's hit NB so we can see all of our polygons. You'll see that I've changed the angle and the maximum length here to do a whole bunch of subdivisions on it. And the reason I did that is it's really good for the remesh. So searching Shift C for the remesh, you'll see that that appears. Holding down Alt as I click it will automatically make it a parent of whatever object I had selected, and see that the remesh is now going to get applied, and we get a lovely even mesh along the entire thing, which now enables me to again search for, this time, smoothing. And there is smoothing. So if I hold down Shift, because I've got remesh selected, if I hold down Shift and hit enter, then it'll create a smoothing as a child of that object, and instantly I've got some lovely remeshed and smoothed out text applied. Move the material up, and that is ready to go there. Next up, take note that we are currently in modeling mode. So if I were to select the remesh and search for, let's say, extrude, you're going to see a bunch of different parametric objects for changing a model. This hasn't been made editable yet. So we've got the capsule base extrude, the extrude generator, the Mo extrude, and more. But instead, now let's feed this into a connect. So I'll search for the word connect. Hold down Alt as I click connect. It makes that apparent, make this editable. Now you'll see that I've got a single model. Now that I have a polygon object, let's go to polygon mode. And now we search for the word extrude. Now you'll see that it's actually the modeling commands that are appearing up at the top of the list. So the context is constantly trying to adapt to what you might be actively working on right now. Something else to note, if we were to make a selection of some sort here, let's search for the word disconnect. Then now you can see we get the disconnect up, but there is also the gear icon, meaning I can click on that gear and it will pop open the preserve groups or not. Before, in the previous commander, you didn't have the option of opening up the specific settings for that tool, but now you can. Back into the command manager, a couple other things to mention. We can dock it, unsurprisingly. We can just dock this anywhere that we want to. We could also say pin it, so if I were to click off of it, it's not going to disappear on us. We can, let's search for the word red again. We'd see everything involved in the word red, or you'd see just the materials. We can change the scale of those. We can change seeing this as a grid, which can be lovely. We can see just the images involving the word red that are connected on my computer. And lastly, let's jump back to list view, shrink these up a little bit, go to all. I'll search for the word rocket lasso. Rocket Lasso has been developing capsules for Maxon. So we've got them all listed here. You can see some of them are Maxon 1 bonuses. But for now, what I want to show is we got this new electric spline modifier. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but if I were to open up this text spline and grab the electric spline modifier and drop it as a child, you're going to see a new spline modifier that we've made. So if I were to hit play, you can see that this is now modifying it as if it's electricity. We can make this as powerful or as weak or as subdivided and use all the different noise types. It's really powerful, really fun. Lots of different settings to tinker around with there. I'm not going to go too far on that because there'll be dedicated information on that in the future. The last thing I want to mention in the commander, though, is here we are searching all the different Rocket Lasso capsules, but I could select all of them and drag them as a group directly into my interface and drop them, say, right there, and all of those will appear in the interface and stay there permanently, especially if we were to save the layout by clicking to create a new layout. Let's reset it so that those aren't there, and again, go back into the commander. And if you hold down Shift as you drag all of those, it's really cool. It'll actually make a palette of them automatically. So now we get the little flyout so it doesn't take up as much room, and we get all of these Rocket Lasso capsules that way. So yeah, the commander, very powerful. I'm going to be using that thing all of the time. I think even in the live streams, like I said, when I'm doing education, it's kind of nice to manually go into a menu, but if I'm doing something repetitive or quickly, like just jumping in the command manager is definitely something I'm going to be doing all the time. Now let's move into the new Symmetry Object options. Now you probably know in the last couple versions we got the new Symmetry Hub, which gave all sorts of options, and in 2023.1 we got the radial option. Well, all these features have been moved over into the Symmetry Object. So I can create a Symmetry Object right here. Now, in the past, if you're going to do symmetry, the first thing you'd have to do is select half of it, delete the other half, but we don't have to do that anymore. We can drop the symmetry object inside, and inside of the symmetry, I'll say remove outside. So now we're cutting on the X plane from positive to negative. So if I were to select my model and select any given point, I can make changes on one side and they will be mirrored over to the other side. And we can use any of our regular modeling tools. So here's the magnet tool. I can grab it and let's select all the points. And then we can drag this around, make any shapes that we'd like. Working very much like the old symmetry object, but I didn't have to delete the other half. But there are additional features here. Let's say I select all of our points. You'll see inside of the symmetry object that we have the option to cut along the plane. So right now we're perfectly mirrored on a point that I made, but if I grab this object, in fact, let's just grab the entire object and move it over, you're going to see it's automatically creating a new cut right where that midpoint is. So we don't have to worry about making sure that we've got that perfect cut in the midpoint. So scoot this however we like, and you see the mirroring, like the way that that's cutting, like automatically that's opening up options that we wouldn't have had in the past. Now let's zero that out. So Shift C, PSR, Enter. Like I said, I'll be using that a lot. Inside we've got additional options. Oh, one thing to mention is the symmetry object in the past could only ever handle the first child. But if I were to make an eyeball here, let's scoot it over, forward, scale it a bit, close enough. If I drop that as the second child of the symmetry, you're going to see that that also gets mirrored onto the other side. So you can feed in multiple objects as children, very handy. But now inside of symmetry, let's play around with also turning on, let's say, mirroring on Y as well. So as soon as I turn that on, you can see it's mirroring on two planes. We can also turn on mirroring on Z. So let's turn that on. Let's try actually minus the plus. And now you see this is getting mirrored in all those orientations. Grabbing the original object, I can now scoot this around in all three axes and create crazy weird shapes. So that's pretty cool. Let's move into the next file to show off some more stuff. Very simple cube, couple extrusions on it. So creating a symmetry object, I'll drop this inside. You know, we get this nice mirroring going. Select the symmetry and say I would like to remove the outside. We get that mirrored plane, but let's automatically also mirror on Y. And how about we bevel this as well? So I'll put this into a group, Alt G, open it up, make a bevel, drop that inside the null as well. And now it's beveling after the symmetry's happened. We can make that as large as we like, and we can add a couple extra subdivisions. If I want to clean that Phong up a little bit, we can say Phong break on the rounding. So now we've got a little bit of bevel on our shape. So selecting this object, we can move it around in a very kind of mechanical motion graphics-y way, making these really cool looking mechanical shapes. So technically we could have done this in the past with like a clever use of bools and symmetry objects, but like this is just so clean and quick and intuitive that I think it's going to open up a lot of possibilities. And also keep in mind that kind of a classic bool example, like bools don't like two objects perfectly meeting. As an example, actually, why don't I just show you, open up a new file. If we were to make a cube, duplicate the cube, scoot it over. Now we get two cubes that are intersecting, but they're perfectly in line with each other. So the bool probably isn't going to know what to do with it too much. So if we drop those in and say, hey, make a, even now you can see that that looks a little bit weird. But if I say make a union of those, that the geometry looks a little bit weird. So as soon as we put these off a little bit, now it's going to work really well, but they couldn't be perfectly lined up. But the symmetry object isn't behaving that way. Instead, it just cuts directly across that plane and then mirrors it and then welds the result. So it gives us a lot more power right there. But this gets extra fun if we keep in mind that we actually also have rotation. So hitting R for rotate, we can now start spinning this around and look at these crazy shapes. Like, you know, this would not be a trivial shape to model in the past, but now just think of this as a motion graphics tool. Like, look at this kaleidoscope effect we get by that spinning around. Again, rotate this on any axis and every single time get like a different shape. All of them looking pretty cool. Like we can stop at any given moment here and be like, okay, that's a cool techie sci-fi thing. That's working great. You could, you know, throw a vibrate tag on there, make these all rotate and spin. But let's make it look a little bit nicer and maybe more practical by opening up this file. And we've got the same setup pretty much. It's just some text instead. So create the symmetry again, drop in the text. And I'll say, hey, mirror on Y as well. So it mirrors top and bottom, left and right. Let's turn off the show planes and also make sure I say remove outside so I'm doing the cutting. Select the text, and now we could have this do something like melt into the ground. It almost gives this mirroring effect, like it's coming out from the water. So it looks neat. We can have it melt into itself by pushing left and right here. And I can also grab on multi-axis here and then have them sync into each other. But again, and look how quick that's running. But again, we could work on this with rotation. So let's let those intersect, hit R, and we'll rotate those around a little bit and rotate that. Let's rotate that on Z. So now if I were to grab on 2 planes and move it around, like look at these crazy shapes, like look at these possibilities. Like, yeah, like I said, technically we could have done this in the past, but this is so quick and intuitive and playful, like just moving around and being like, oh, let's see how that movement looks. It's like, oh, that looked cool, but let's try like a different angle. It's like, oh, that one's also looking pretty neat. So many ways of just doing motion graphics, playing with text, making some weird, crazy shapes. So yeah, that's looking pretty neat right there. But something to keep in mind here is the Symmetry Object doesn't just have planar, it's also got radial mode. So as soon as I switch this from planar to radial, then I can see that I'm getting 6 copies of this all spinning around. Again, live for us to grab and move around and manipulate and change the way these are colliding. Keep in mind that they are, again, welding into each other. Scoot these in. Oh, look at this as a reveal of text. Like that looks pretty cool. Like I just love the way that these inner parts end up looking, traveling straight through. Inside of Symmetry, I often would turn on mirroring. So it's actually let me show the planes. So if we don't have mirror on, then it's essentially taking something in the slice and then mirroring it again and again and again. But what's a little more intuitive to me is turning on mirror. So now it's actually cutting at a center point and mirroring it left and right, and then that gets radially applied around as many times as we set our slice count. So we can make as many of those as we like. And almost everything I do, it's like, oh, those are some interesting looking shapes there that I wouldn't have made otherwise. Let's leave it at 7. Grab the text and let's try and, get some nice orientations here. So now as I move this through, like, look at that kaleidoscope reveal and even disappears through. And these are getting welded together properly. So if we were to travel inside this letter H here, you'll see that it is properly hollow. So perfect mirroring on Symmetry. And then keep in mind that, lovely, we've got the shape, but we can feed the Symmetry into a Symmetry. So we got a single one. Let's drop that in. Make sure we're removing the outside ones. Let's not mirror on X, but we will mirror on Y. Drop that inside. And now we can see it's mirroring top and bottom. Moving this down. Let's do a world axis. Start pulling these down. And again, those are going to be getting cut as we move it. So now we got a radial cut and then a symmetrical cut on Y, and each of these being a perfect volume where those can travel through, revealing these different bits of text and these different shapes. So a lot, and it's almost like every combination here is just accidentally making something neat. So very fun to play around with, and I bet we're going to get a lot of cool looking motion graphics pieces out of this, just in general, like so much interesting space to just explore with that. Next up, we've got the new thickness tool, and I'm very excited about this one. Opening up this file, we've got a very simple cube here. I'm going to make it editable and make a couple of selections for us to do some quick testing. We'll select those, delete, we got corner. Let's grab, actually I'll grab this big old corner here, delete that. And let's just get a nice straightforward stripe on the top. Okay, just delete out a couple of random sections there. Now, in the past, if we wanted to add thickness to something, our best procedural way of doing that was to use the cloth surface. If I grab this cube and drop it inside the cloth surface, though, you're going to see that, first of all, it's going to look a little bit weird. It bulges out and get all these curves, but that's because this is currently subdividing. So let's say don't subdivide it. Instead, I want to add some thickness on here. So that's not too much. Let's push it further. So I'll say 10. And you'll see that the problem is this works great for cloth, but now this is like bulging out the shape in some weird ways. If we turn on bulging, that just makes it worse. It kind of inflates everything. And limit doesn't do anything in this particular area. So yeah, not too much for us to do with the setting. So, it works pretty well for cloth, but let's pull that out and instead create a new thicken. So dropping the cube inside a thicken, it looks exactly the same. But you click on thicken and we switch from the basic mode, and I don't think I'll ever use basic mode, just switch immediately to advanced. You're going to see a way better job where that starts looking really clean there. And not to bury the lead, you can see it looks a little messed up down here. But if we go and say, hey, we got perpendicular boundary, and I say 1%, that's going to clean that up as well. So what is Thicken doing? Well, it's creating an inside and an outside for us so that we actually get some thickness on the object. We can make that as thick or as thin as we like, and you can currently see that it's bulging from the center point. It's going out and in. So if we say 10, it's 5 out, 5 in. But we can modify that really intuitively with this position. So if I grab position and pull it in, you can see it's going to push inward. And if I grab it and pull it to 100%, it's going to be pushing outward. If I have a duplicate of the original object, you can see that's now perfectly on the inside. And if we drag the position to 0%, you can see it would be perfectly on the outside. So that works exactly as you would hope and expect. So yeah, that's position. We can pivot however we like. We can add subdivisions on this inner part for how those are transitioning. And then if we take this entire thing, throw that into a subdivision surface, you can see it does a lovely job of adding thickness and rounding that out. Especially if we start pivoting this, you can see that both of those shapes transition quite nicely. Pull that back out again. What else do we got? There is a couple of checkboxes for what bit of geometry is being returned. So I could say, don't return the end cap. So you can see that we've got the walls and the inner part. Or you can say, actually just do the outer part, not the inner. Or turn both off, keep just the shell, and we get this kind of cool shape. I don't know how we would have made that too well in the past. And then, of course, we can turn that off and get the opposite, where we don't have those walls. We don't have the shell, but we do get the end cap and the start cap. So that's looking great. Love it. Let's move into a slightly fancier example here. In this file, we've got some basic text set up, and there's an HDR. It's all set up with Redshift. So for a basic thing, why don't we begin with a nice clean bevel, which I'll drop inside both of those. Select both bevels and say 0.5, and let's add a couple of subdivisions. Now I'd love to add a glass material on there, so I'll search for glass, and let's say I want to look for materials, and there we go. I want to grab this safety glass, which is one of the Redshift materials included. Let me copy that onto both of those, and then we will start up a Redshift render view. And there we go. We can see it applied, and it looks like exactly what it is. It's glass on top of like really thick, solid blocks of text. So let's say I wanted there to be a thin shell of glass around it. Now, inside the Redshift material, I think there's like the thin shell setting, but let's make this real geometry. So I'll pause that and create a new Thicken and drop both of these as a child of that. Let's delete one bevel, and I'm going to pull this bevel out for a moment and even move one material up. So let's take a look at this step by step. Right now it looks a little bit like a mess, but let's switch this to advanced, which will clean it up significantly. It's really thick right now, so let's drop this down to a thickness of 1, and then zoom in a bit and look at one of these corners here. So you can see right there, you get this lovely corner. What I'd like to show first is if I drop the bevel, let's turn off Thicken. If I drop the bevel on there and turn it on, you can see we get this nice big bevel. So now we're going to thicken the result of that. So turning Thicken on, there it is. Now, as I grab Thicken and I change the position from on the outer part of 100, look at this inner bevel on the inside. Let's get a good angle. If I start pulling this in, you're gonna see that it shrinks and shrinks and shrinks until we end up with this really crisp, like back to 90-degree angle corner. So that works really well. I don't know if it'll always work that well, but in this instance, you can see how it was even able to compensate for the bevel. It's almost magic in this case. I'm not sure how they're doing that. It works so much better than your average bevel would look. And the Thicken, I feel like, is doing so many more complicated things. So that's great right out of the gate. Let's switch the thickness to a nice simple 0.5 and get a nice position on there. Maybe something like that. So we've got the glass on top of that geometry, and let's pull the bevel outside. So we're actually beveling the result of both of those. So zooming back out to our original position, let's pull Redshift back over again. And there you go. Now you can see it looks like we have a shell of glass around the outside of it, like some real geometry. So that's looking really nice and pretty simple to work with, but let's make it a little bit fancier. So I'll pause that. And let's add in a couple additional pieces of geometry. And this is where I think it gets pretty fun, and you can see the power of it. I'll make a duplicate of that, turn off the original, temporarily turn off bevel. What I'd like to do right now, and let's delete that material. What I'd like to do right now is make a very thin bit of text on the inside. Now, right now, I could pivot this in and out, and you can see we get a little bit thinner. But if we say, hey, don't show the end cap, which would be the outside, if I turn that off, then now we're only seeing the inside part of it. So as I move the position in or out, or in this case, add some thickness, you can see it's actually getting thinner. And look, this font does not have a thin variant, but here you can see that we're getting a very, very thin and consistent version of it. So that right there already is exciting. I'll make this as thin as I can. I'll use this position slider to dial that in. If we go too far, those will crisscross. But as long as we don't cross the geometry over itself, then that works quite nicely. Grabbing both bits of text, I'll make those thinner. Let's put the depth the smallest we can while there is still like the shape overall getting thinner. So that's working well. What I'd like to do is make that luminant. So I've already got some material set up here. I'm going to grab this emission, which is a very, very bright emission. We'll drop that on there. So it's going to make it nice and bright. Now, something I would like to do, we'll do on the next one. Let's duplicate that thicken again. And this time, let's make it not quite as thin. So I'll create the, we still want the inside bit. So, but let's pull it out. So you can see that it gets larger, but not so large as to be like the original one. And I'll activate that bevel. So it's going to round it out nicely. We'll grab the entire thing and scoot it backward. And this time I would like it to not be this emissive material, but I'll grab this lovely copper, drop that on there. Now, something I want to point out is we turned off this end cap, the very outside part of it. So that means if we were to make this editable, or to be really clean, I'll throw it into connect and make it editable. If I select it, go to polygon mode and select all of it, you'll see it's very blue. And that's because we're seeing what should have been the inside, which means, if it was open and hollow, this is the way you'd want normals to work. We actually want the opposite of that. These are backwards normals because we're viewing it from the outside. So hitting undo a few times, get us back to this state. We can parametrically flip those normals to be the correct direction by hitting Shift-C, and we'll search all for the word reverse, and we can find ourselves the reverse capsule. So here's reverse normals. I'll drag this in, and I would like that to happen, let's just say after the bevel. It's going to flip all the normals around. So it is now correct in its orientation for the polygons. So now we've got some text, we've got this backer. One last thing I'd like to do, let's grab that original thicken. I'll make a duplicate of that one, activate the entire thing, delete the material. What I'd like to do is turn off this end cap, so we're seeing only the inside, and then shrink that down just a little bit extra, because what I'd like to do is turn this piece into some frosted glass. So maybe a little thicker, just so some of that geometry doesn't poke through. And pull in this frosted glass material. All these materials, by the way, are inside of the asset browser, except for emission. That's just a simple, super bright emission here. You see it's all the way up to 25 with a kind of a purpley blue color. So I also need to reverse the normals on the emissive material, and I need to reverse the normals on this frosted glass part of it, because all those I said to only show the inside. But anyway, grabbing the two inner parts, let's scoot those back a little bit so they're filling out. And now if I zoom out a bit, actually let's link to this camera because I've got some nice depth of field set up on it. Let's send that over to the renderer and see how that looks. Whoops, stop that. I forgot to turn those back on. Start again. And done. So a fun render to make, entirely parametric, using all these different thickens to be able to manipulate fonts in ways that we never would have been able to in the past. So really excited for this. I'm going to be using it all the time. There's so many use cases for this. Just to push it even a little bit further, we can combine this with one of my Rocket Lasso plugins. Let me copy, open a new file, paste it in, delete the material, throw that into a connect object just to make sure they're all welded down. Zoom up. Stop these from intersecting at all. And then if I create a Rocket Lasso slicer, we can change the orientation to Z. Say I would like only one cut. Drop that inside and scoot it to make sure I'm actually intersecting it. And there we go. We get a lovely bit of outlining of that text, turning this back into a spline, which I could then take and feed into an extrude. Set that to 5. And there we go. So a nice way of getting some thickness on a spline. There are two more little things I'd like to mention that we can do with the thicken. Let's create a disk shape, NB. Let's jump this up to 64, and we'll do, 25 subdivisions. If we make a selection tag on this, a polygon selection tag, so if I say other, And to make a polygon selection, we can set that to be based on fields. And I'd like it to be, I don't know, let's say a radial field. So there's a radial field that should be making a selection for us. I can make this large, or we can shrink it down. So there's a little bit of a transition. If we want to be able to see that, let's make a new material, drop that on top of it, set this to a nice bright red color, and say, yes, material, but you are limited to the polygon selection. So you can see that, this is normal stuff that we can do with fields and selection tags in the last couple of versions. If you want to get a little extra fancy, we could always say, do a random field and set that to overlay, get a little variation on there. There's our spherical field. We can, transition that however we like. But inside of the thicken, we can feed that into the disk inside of it. And right now it's thickening everywhere, but you say, actually, let's go to advanced and say limit to a polygon selection. So not making anything editable, I can drop this polygon selection here, and now you can see that those are being extruded. We don't need the material anymore. That selection is now being extruded. We've got a bunch of different settings that we might keep in mind here. We probably don't want to do both shell and start and end. So let's just choose some of them. If I say no start cap, you can see we get actually let's pivot from the top. There we go. That looks a little bit better. So now we can have that hole open or closed. We could say just return the top. So now we get the original shape, and this is extruded upward. Turn off the shell, and we just get this part floating away from the surface. So anyway, the point being, we can use polygon selections, which of course can be procedural now, as a way of controlling exactly where the this extrusion in this case is going to be. And then a completely different thing that we can do is open up another new file. Now, keep this simple. We'll just make a plane, put a bunch of subdivisions on there. And then if we add a thicken to it right now, we're going to get some thickness on it. But let's add onto the plane a vertex map. And again, that creates a field for us. Inside of that field, make some sort of fall off. So I'll make a box field, make that large enough that it sees the entire thing. That can be overlaid by, again, a random field. Let's say overlay on that. And it's based on Perlin noise. Make that large enough we can actually see the pattern. Change it something a little crazier, maybe like a Luca. And there we go. And now we've got that falling off vertex map. Let's give it a full remap to a peak. There we go. So we got a nice shape there. If I feed, now we activate the thicken again. So that's working. But inside of thicken, we can drop a thickness map. So there is our vertex map. And now you can see that the different parts are getting a different thickness applied. Again, let's make sure we're pivoting from the correct orientation. Let's make that way taller. And now I've got a flat bottom on it, and then we can get some nice height variation on there. So it's a nice way of being able to transition how thick something is supposed to be based entirely on the vertex map. In this case, it might be nice to also add a solid in and pull way back on that just to give us a minimum. So yeah, you get some thickness and the rest of the height, but you get a really nice clean piece of geometry, which would be significantly more difficult to make with a more complex rig. Those are two powerful options I'm sure we will be seeing more of during my live streams, being able to limit this to a thickness map or a polygon selection. It's important to note that also any selections that you make and any vertex maps should be able to transfer from one surface to the other. A couple different options there for keep on the source, move it only to the cap, or copy it onto both. So a lot of power in seemingly a very, very simple tool. So let's close down all these files here and move to the next thing. Next up, we have a capsule. Actually, it's a node, which of course will function as a capsule. This one was made by Maxon, and I really, really like it. So let's look at some super basics very quick. Just make a text object. And we make this any shape that we like, do anything we want to it. And then just search for the word convex. And you're going to find the convex hull. And this is a modifier. If we drop this as a child, you're going to see every individual text is outlined by geometry that traps it inside. It's the convex shape. Oftentimes, this is the type of shape that's being generated when we are running, say, the bullet simulation stuff, whenever they were rigid bodies. Now, if we were to instead throw that text into a connect object, therefore it's treating it all as a single model and not individual letters, and drop that inside, you're going to see an outline across the entire thing. So, okay, like what are some use cases here? Now, if you'll indulge me, let's pop open this file and take a look at what we've got and make something a little bit fancier. So here's a rig you've already seen me do pretty much, which is I've got some text, and then I beveled it. I'm throwing it to a connect to weld it together, and I'm remeshing it just so we get nice clean geometry on there. Now, technically, I've got some soft bodies on here, pretty much all defaults, except I have some soft body poles on there to maintain a little structure. If I have play, there is simulation running, but there's pretty much no gravity, so it's just going to sit there. Now that we've got that, what I'd like to do is select this connect object, so just the text and the bevel, and make an instance out of it. So just a copy if we ever want to update. And in this instance, I'll move it afterward just for calculation order stuff. I'd like to create a hull around it, but yeah, let's start with a hull. So let's search for convex hull again, drag this as a child, and it should make an outline along the entire thing. Working great. Now let's make this a little bit thicker. I don't want it so perfectly aligned with it. So let's use a thicken. Why not? So I'll throw this inside a thicken, and I definitely want to push outside, but I don't want it to be too thick. So let's just set this to even like a 0.1. So it's just barely extra outlined. Having done that, let's make sure that there is no shell and no start cap. So it's only this inflated outer shell, not the inner structure. And with that, we can subdivide this with several different ways of doing that. Throw into a cloth surface if we want to. No factor, and then just subdivide, subdivide, subdivide. Maybe 3 will work, because then we throw it again into a remesh. Love that remesh. So that should remap that. We get a nice even polygon count all around. Just want to make sure that this is not sneaking through, which it is right now. So going back to the thicken, let's go 0.2. Maybe push that out a little bit further. Still sneaking through a little bit, but if we tell the remesh to don't worry about the adaptiveness so much, then that's rounding out pretty well. You know what? I can deal with that. That's fine. Okay, so now we've got a nice hull on the outside surrounding the entire shape, entirely procedural, which of course is always my goal. So I want to get a little extra detail on this thing. You know what? I might even put an extra subdivision on the thicken. Just give us some extra polygons overall. Give that a second to remesh again. There we go. Super subdivided now. Now let's create, I haven't used one of these in a while, but let's make a displacer. I usually use a plane effector to deform, but making it simple displacer, throw in a noise. So this noise is displacing it. I want to only push outward, so I'll set the intensity outward. And in the noise, I'll say that we want this really stretched on X. So that's going to stretch it out. As we pull down on our global scale, you see we get these nice wide lines traveling through, and that's starting to look pretty much the way I want it to. Back into the displacer proper, start shrinking the height to the point where what I'd like to see is just some of these wrinkles poking through. Moving back into the noise, let's play with our clamping. So let's move our high clip, maybe our low clip. Yeah, there we go, our low clip. And there we go. So I start getting these wrinkles sticking through. Maybe increase this just a little bit. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. So push that out a little bit more. Excellent. Pretty much spot on. I just want a little extra detail, a little extra geometry so we can get some nice pinches on here. Because what we're going for is a really, really nice vacuum form wrap on this thing. So having done that, let's say, do we remesh again? We can take the end result of this and feed it into another remesh, because why not? And let's leave adaptiveness on, see what it gives us. So yeah, remeshing the remesh. There we go. Nice and very even polygon count all the way around. Oh, let it finish. There we go. Even polygon count. Yeah, it made these wrinkles way more even in the way that they look. I like that. So let's throw that entire mess into a connect. Don't weld. And let's say this is manual, and we can put a custom Fong tag on there. Let's just make a cube editable and steal the Fong tag. There we go. So let that all sort of update and look at the final end result. We get these lovely wrinkles, and then it's going to remesh the remesh. And at this point, you could make it editable if you wanted. I like it to be procedural as much as possible. So we've got this crazy outline. That all works for me. Let's now, on that connect, add a new simulation cloth. I'm going to say, hey, this cloth can be really bendy. It can be pretty stretchy. But the main thing I want to do is have it start shrinking, pulling the air out from the entire thing. So let's say it's going to balloon over the course of 30 frames down to 1/10 of the air inside. So just doing that, let's hit play and see what happens. So hitting play, let's watch what happens. The air's getting sucked out. You can see we're getting these nice pinched wrinkles overall. And then there we go. It starts pinching down even further. You can really see the form of those letters overall. So that's pretty much all the air drained out from it. Looking pretty good. So now, after that simulation is run, why don't we say, hey, that should then get smoothed out by a subdivision surface. Let's just have that go 1 by 1 so it's not too much. Excellent. Oh, that's looking really good. And now that we've got that, I want to put plastic on here, but I want the plastic to look really thin. So let's feed this whole thing into another thicken. I'd like that to push only outward, and this is going to be really thin. So let's say another 0.1. And I want the position to be starting from the inside, pushing out. So I believe that's correct. Let that all catch up. And now you can see we've got a very, well, at this point, a fairly complex hierarchy, all stacking up to end up with this wrinkly surrounding of the object. Meaning, if we open up this plastic, so I've got a glossy plastic from the asset browser, drop that onto here. And let's go to our Redshift and take a look at what that's giving us. And let's run on that and let's see what we've got. I could let that keep going, but you get the point. We're getting some really, really nice vacuum form effect on here. And the hull is enabling us to get that lovely outline on the overall mesh. So yeah, very pleased with that. Let's jump on into one more file. Pretty straightforward setup right now. I've just got a cloner, a sphere, and a random that's making them travel around. They're not even simulated. So now, what if we want to put this into a hull? Well, if we just put that into a null, Alt-G, search for our convex hull, drop that also inside the null, you're going to see it doesn't do anything. What we need to do, as usual, throw that into a connect object. So those all get welded together, and now you see we're getting a really nice outline that is encapsulating the entire shape. But something that I thought is nice to do is maybe you don't want those big spherical outlines on here. Maybe you just want it from point to point to point to point. So here's a neat rig to do something like that. Let's delete everything else. There's our cloner. So I'll make a brand new copy of this cloner. And inside of it, I'm going to put a single point. So I can make a polygon here, make that editable, select just this point, invert everything, and then hit delete. Actually, hold shift when you hit delete. That way it will leave one little point for you. Then you can set that point to be at 0, 0. So now we've got just a single point inside of a polygon object. That goes inside the second cloner. I can tell this cloner to clone onto an object. The object will be the first cloner, so whatever that one's doing, this other one will copy it. And let's make sure this doesn't have a random effector in here. So this cloner just does whatever the first one does. And we can hide the original one. Now back into the object tab. Let's make sure we're not cloning out to the surface, but we're cloning directly onto the axis of wherever those other clones are. So now throwing that into a connect object, we can also bring in our convex hull. And now we are perfectly outlining that with just like a perfect point on each corner. Hitting play on that, you can see we got a nice clean shape there overall. So that's, it's a fine raw bit of material for us to work from. Now this would actually combine really well with a bunch of different Rocket Lasso plugins. One would be, of course, one of my favorite, Mesh the Spline, feed that inside Mesh the Spline. And now that is a spline that we're getting as a result. And you could do things like subdivide that. So I'll set this to be heavily subdivided and still linear. And a trick I like doing is if we make a linear field, I can drop this inside and say, oh, let me make sure in my Mesh the Spline, I'm going to say, hey, as you're outlining this, don't have these all be connected. Instead, explode all of them out. So now every little line is its own line. So with this plane, I can change it to a point deformer, and it's pushing everything up. But instead of pushing up, I'll say I would like you to be based on where the effector is, and I want you to push down, not too far. Now everything's pushing down. I don't want everything to go there. So let's go into the fields and limit it to wherever the actual spline is as a spline object. And then remap this. Right now they're all linear, which doesn't look too good. But if we change our fall off curve to say that it's going to be 0 at the beginning, 0 at the end, but then in the middle, start applying that effect, you can see that they'll all start drooping down. And we can curve that upward, make that nice and sharp, get this really nice, fun, droopy shape getting applied, which is now perfectly connecting each of those lines. And then, at this point, you're just having fun. So I could throw this entire thing into a volume builder. And let's put that in the proper order. Drop this inside the volume builder. And it's going to see all of the lines. So say that it'll see the line. It should be down to, I don't know, 3. Voxel size 2. Make sure that the density is high enough so it can see all of those. and maybe make a dilate, or actually open and close should be cool. And as I increase that, you can see how they're kind of blobbing together. Oh yeah, look at that. So I get some nice blobs going. Feed that through into a builder. Oop, not a builder, a mesher. And now we get that final geometry. And pushing it one step further, I love making a smoothing deformer. Drop that inside. Just let those shrink down even more. Maybe just like 2 iterations of it. Yeah. So yeah, get really nice connections, blobbing all of that stuff together. Maybe another iteration or 2. Yeah, really nice, fun connections, all procedural. And I should be able to hit play on here. The lines will pop in and out of existence, but you can see we get these nice connections going in between. So yeah, again, opening up some really, really cool possibilities here as just another little piece in the giant puzzle. Moving on, there is a small addition to the cloth simulation that is totally worth talking about. So what do we got? Basic setup, you already seen me do it. I've got a text, a remesh, and a smooth, so we get this nice rounded base level of text. And I've got a vertex map. Actually, let's just do this from scratch. If I right click and say other vertex map, by default it's created using fields, and inside the fields I'll drag this linear field. So you can see that there's a linear field that I can drag through the object, and it's just going to fade from yellow, which is 100%, to red, which is 0%. So that's all that is doing. Now let's add on a new simulation cloth tag, and we'll leave this all default. We'll move into the balloon tab and activate that. I would like to overpressure this, so it's going to inflate extra big, and let's have it happen a little quicker. So not doing anything else, if I hit play, then you're going to see that this entire object is going to inflate and kind of be bobbling around all over the place. You see how that rolls, etc. So what I'd like to do is turn on a little bit of mix animation. So I'll turn on with pins. And with pins at 100% just means jump back to your original position. So if I say something like 11%, then let's start over again, and you should see them inflate, and that should be less inclined to go rolling around. There's just a little bit of force trying to keep everything a little bit more where it's at. That's fine. Okay, so now let's play around with the new setting, which is simply this map, which is associated with the balloon. So right now, the balloon is inflating the volume up to 200% of whatever the current volume is. But now we can assign a map to it, a vertex map or color map, and that is going to say which parts of it want to be inflated. So pretty straightforward. If I drag this on, I'm currently saying every part of it wants to be inflated. So if I hit play, it's going to look exactly the same. But as I grab my linear field and begin to drag it through, as soon as we start passing through, you can see that part is starting to deflate just a little bit. As we keep going, that will get more extreme until we drain all of the air out from them, and you see all these different parts of the balloon just collapse down. Now, as I drag it back through, they're going to want to inflate again, and they will return back to their original volume. So very fun, very easy to control. You see how easy it is to just pass this through, have complete control over the way that that's working. There's going to be significantly different behavior depending on if you put a bunch of stretchiness on there, if you put a bunch of friction on there, if you have them being sticky. Like everything is going to have an effect all over the place. The amount of overpressure that we have, all of these will affect things differently. But the simple way of understanding it is just there's going to be a certain amount of pressure applied to the shape overall, and where should it be getting applied. So that's very fun. Really straightforward setup there to explain. Now, of course, we could push this a little bit further. Keep in mind, we could always feed vertex maps into each other. So right-clicking, we can add a vertex color map there. Move this over. I'd like to drive it with our existing vertex map. So in this case, I could say, yeah, nearest, it's going to be remapped, which enables our color remap, which enables us to turn on gradient. Drag this up, recolorize this to be a brightish red, and that can, when it's all inflated, the inflation, it can go all the way to, let's say, this pink color. So right now it's all super inflated. So if I play, it's going to be very inflated. If I keep that tag selected, otherwise you won't see it in the viewport. And I can drag this through. And as we deflate, you see it's going to become more red, as if the plastic is less stretched out, as if the rubber is less stretched out. And actually, you could probably drive the whole thing through the thickness as well, feeding that remesh into a thicken, and probably be pretty thin. Let's say 1, and that could be driven by a vertex map. And we could drag this existing one in. So that's how thick it's going to be. But I think it's actually the opposite result of what we want, where right now when it's really inflated, that means it's going to be at its thickest, where it'd be actually the opposite. So we could duplicate this map and rename it something nice, or at least a 2, give them different names. Otherwise it won't work. And let's drag in this vertex map. So now it's referencing that. Where is it? Invert of that. So now that's become red. Let's say that the thicken is being driven by vertex map 2. And now you can see suddenly it's not thick at all. So, and this is happening after the simulation, so that's pretty safe. Hit play, grab our linear field, and we can drag this through. And yeah, we can see all those passing through. And let's pause it right there. And if we zoom up, hopefully we can see that, yeah, we can see that there's more thickness getting applied here, and it's getting thinner. Even here you can see the fall off as it gets thicker into the yellow area. So yeah, that all layers up very nicely, all controlled via one original vertex map. And you know, pop open another file, this one, exact same setup here, except it's being driven via the balloon tag, and this is the balloon tag. And there's a bunch of things in here, but really the important one is there's a spherical field that has a vibrate tag. And I have a delay, so it leaves a bit of a trail. And I put a minimum amount here, just a little bit, so it's never completely deflated. So now when I hit play, now you can see that this is traveling through, and wherever this spherical field travels through, it's going to inflate just that one little part. So lots of control over that. I think there's also a decent amount of pin here. The pin animation's at 25%, so that maintains the original shape quite a bit. Where if we said no pin animation, that they're just going to be blobbing all over the place. But if you go too tight, then let's say go up to 55, that's going to become so sharp that this ballooning effect is barely doing anything. So when you're playing with pins and when you're playing with force, like, you definitely got to play around and find like that happy balance in between. But yeah, working really well, really quick. It's just a nice addition, and you know, good additional effects we can play around with when it comes to the balloon effects inside of Cloth. A couple of quick things of note here. Pop this file open. So apparently the graphics library transmission file, or the GLTF file, import and export has been improved. It's supposed to be able to see Redshift materials at import and export. In addition, it is got better geometry import basics. So let's do a quick file export, go track down GLTF, and I'm going to leave it all default, say OK, and save that here. Then go over to Google, and I'm going to the 4th link here. That's the one that looked best. Don't know anything about this file format personally, but if we drag that file that just exported in, you see that indeed it did import. This front is nice and shiny. Over here in my original file, that was shiny, and this one was dull, and that seems to have carried across. So yeah, the file seems to import just fine with the colors from Redshift. So that can be pretty handy. It's supposed to be mostly for like an AR, or like, it's just a basic web format. So, little tidbit there. A small little thing, probably worth mentioning to some people, is that Python has been updated to 3.10.8 as opposed to 3.9. So it's going to have some of the nice newest Python stuff in there. And then, unfortunately, I haven't been able to figure out a way of demoing this. But if you're doing any kind of CAD importing, then you always end up with these normal tags. And apparently, they had problems deforming, and now they're deforming way better, but I haven't been able to find a broken version of it in the older version of Cinema, so it just seems to be working for me. But that should be working better for anyone who is having a problem with it. Let's switch gears back over to simulation stuff and talk about Pyro. Now, the first one is a change in the way that the rotation force works. So let's actually pop open 2023.1 and also open up this file. Temporarily, I'll turn off this Pyro stuff, hit play, and you'll see I've got a simple particle emitter, and there is a rotation force. Just set the default. You find that under Simulate Forces Rotation. So there it is, spinning around the particles, pretty straightforward. But if I were to turn on a couple of spheres here, and we'll even make the Pyro from scratch, simulation Pyro, rewind and hit play, you're going to see that we now get lovely fire, but it's not behaving like these particles are. We're getting a really cool fire tornado, but everything's getting pulled very much towards the center. So opening this up in 2023.2, exact same file. I'll even add in the Pyro again from scratch. Pyro emitter, nothing else has changed, hit play, and now you'll see that the fire is actually behaving like the particles are, where it's drifting along and spinning slowly. So we can get that consistency. We can still make the tornado effect, but we would want to do that with some attraction towards the center. Something else you'll notice as I go between these two is look at how colorful the smoke is in the new version. In the old one, I've got these lights. They're Redshift lights, but that would also work with standard lights, where they are not casting any illumination. But in the new version, we can add up to 7 different lights where in the viewport, you'll see the illumination directly happening. So we can grab either of these lights, change the color to whatever we like, and it will be reflected on the actual object. So pretty handy right there out of the gate. Now, let's open up another file. Just a bit of text for 0.2. The font's a little thick for what I want, so I'm going to put it into this thicken, turn it on, and we can manipulate the position and shrink that down just a little bit so that it is not quite so large. And now I can add on a simulation pyro emitter. Hide the original geometry. And what would I like this pyro to do? Well, I would like it to emit not from the surface, but the interior, the actual volume. So hitting play, we're going to see that we get a burst of fire, exactly what we'd be expecting. But for this setup, we're going to talk about the addition of the Cinema 4D noises inside of Pyro, which is great. Let's tab back to the other one, and you'll see that if we go under noise, we just have 3 settings of the strength, scale, and frequency. But now we get a bunch more. Like, look at all these extra settings. So to show this off, I shall turn off our temperature. So now it's only going to be emitting this density. And let's make it a nice bright yellow. Hitting play, I should now get just a cloud of yellow. It's a little bit dense as far as that cloud is concerned. So let's drop the density down to maybe 2. And I want more detail. You can see the voxels here. So I'll drop that down a little bit. Selecting our Pyro object, you'll see another change where if I click on, by default, this would look like this. If you go to the Pyro scene, before there was all the different scene settings, and it was a little bit confusing because it was actually kind of linked to the overall simulation settings. Actually, let's go to the previous version of Cinema. If I select the Pyro object and we go to the Pyro tab, you see we just get all the information right away, which is directly linked to, if we went to Simulation Pyro, it's linked to this. Where now it's a little bit more clear when we move into the Pyro output that it's linked to the scenes settings, which means we control that down and get access to it. All I want to do here, though, was decrease our voxel size down to maybe 2. So now when I hit play, we're going to get way more detail in it. So if we let that drift a little bit, you're going to see these start to travel upward because the density has a little bit of buoyancy. But what I like to do is move down here and play around with the noise. But in order to see it clearly, I'm going to say, hey, yes, you're creating a bunch of density, but I want it to disappear very quickly. So in that output under the Pyro scene, I'll scroll down until we get to the dissipation. So it's how everything fades away. And I'll say that it's going to dissipate the density, the smoke will dissipate over the course of essentially 4 frames. It's going to lose 25% of its power. So hitting play, rewind, you're going to see that this will fade out very quickly, which essentially means it's constantly refreshing. It's adding a new smoke, but the old smoke is disappearing, which will enable us to go into the main Pyro tab. And now moving to the noise tab, we can look at the noise. By default, it looks pretty subtle. It's good. It's really important to put this noise in general because it breaks up the initial pattern. But we can see it really clearly if I grab this contrast and crank it up all the way. So essentially, this is just black and white as far as the noise is concerned. So hitting play, you can very clearly see these holes in it. So we've got a nice setup here where it's still going to feel like smoke, but we can actually see the noise pattern. So cranking the noise scale up a bunch, we can now see that pattern looking pretty nice. We can set an animation speed. So let's set this up to something like 5, which is usually a good speed for noises. We can blatantly see that moving around. And change this to any noise pattern that we like. Switch this over to, actually one that's pretty cool is we can do a cell noise. And this is going to be, let's shrink that back down. You see we get these block shapes traveling through. If we move that a little slower, we can see we get these solid block shapes. And as the time changes, they'll jump to the new shape. And jumping to something like Luca, which is really nice for like kind of an infinitely cloudy shape. We crank that noise scale up a bit. We've got a nice animation speed, and we can see it just drifting over time, slowing that noise down just a little bit. We can see the pattern. And then we also have the movement built in. This might actually be calibrated a little bit weird, because I found, let's put 0 animation speed. I found you have to put huge numbers in here. Let's say I want to move on Y. So let's say 55. I don't really feel the movement, so let's do 555. And it's a little faster. Let's add another 5 in there. And now I finally feel it. So yeah, 5,000 is a pretty big number. But look at this lovely drifting of this noise traveling through. So I think it opens up a lot of cool effects where you can keep a shape really sort of static here, but get all the detail of a noise cloud passing through. And we've got the things like the relative scale. We can make this way taller, so these will look like streaks traveling through. Maybe even make this a little faster. We'll say ×4 on the speed there. So yeah, get those drifting. Lots of combinations, all these different noise types. So I think it opens up a huge category of new animations that could be made just using pyro and smoke. And keep in mind, I'm just playing with this with density, but we could also be turning on temperature, and this would also be driving where the fuel is. So now fire will be appearing from these different spots. So this kind of dripping liquid fire. Let's actually, just for fun, invert the direction of the flame. We could invert the gravity, but if we go into the pyro output, we can find the... Where does that hide? Maybe under general? Yeah. So here's our buoyancy. So the temperature right now, depending on the heat, is going to want to travel upward. We'll just set that to negative. So now the fire wants to go down. So now we should get sort of a liquid fire effect that they want to be dripping downward. Very, very fun. Yeah, super dig it. The noise is a great addition for us to have total control. And of course, the Cinema 4D noises have always been amazing. Now I want to show my favorite new feature inside of the Pyro for 2023.2. We'll start with a brand new file for this one. So my goal in this one is to create kind of these colored powdered bursts. So you've seen this in different videos, and they're often used in like races and marathons, but I want to aim for something sort of like this, these color bursts. So moving into Cinema, we got to build a little bit of a rig for ourselves, try and keep it relatively simple. So to begin with, I'll create a sphere. Shrink it down a bit. I'm gonna make it pretty big overall, so we're working at sort of a default pyro scale, which looks good on like a default cube. So smaller sphere, feed that into a cloner, and that shall be linear, and I'll make a pile of them, so let's make like 15. And I want them to be directly on top of each other. Then let's turn it into a simulation by adding a bullet rigid body, and these are all colliding with each other. So you know, they're going to be simulated, but when I hit play, they're suddenly going to want to explode away from each other. So the explosions are really quick right now because they're very much intersecting, but I want to use that to our advantage. So why don't we separate them out a little bit to get some random direction, and then we won't have to create any initial like explosive force. We'll just use them intersecting to create that force. So keep it simple, add in a random effector that's already giving us position. We don't need this to go too far, so I'll just say like 555. And now they're just pushed out a little bit, but that gives them an initial direction that they want to shoot out. So if I hit play, we're going to see that they kind of explode out in a more uniform pattern. So what I would like to do, well, let's actually add some pyro right away. If you're going to add pyro to a cloner setup, you don't add it to the child, you add it directly to the cloner. So here we'll say simulation pyro, and let's hit play and see what we get. And you'll see we get a really nice burst of fire and smoke heading off in all directions. What I'd like to do is have this very much kind of fire directly outward instead of going in all directions. We'll have it have an orientation as if you were like throwing a handful of powder at the camera. So keep it simple, create a cube, right click, bullet, collider body, and I'll scoot this backward until it's just barely intersecting those cubes. So again, we're just going to use the natural intersection here to control the direction. So hitting play, we should hopefully see all those burst forward now. Visually, we don't need to see the cube, so we'll hide that. Let's go to a frontal angle and see what we're ending up with. Actually, that's looking pretty good. What I'd like to do is have them lose their velocity relatively quickly, because those will fly for a while before gravity takes over. So into our simulation, I'll set the force. Yeah, let's move into the force tab. Set the drag to, I don't know, like, let's do 15 again. Rewind, hit play, and let's see what we get. Yeah, there we go. Now you see they're starting to slow down, and then they start drifting downward, which is what I'm aiming for. I'm going to hide all this grid stuff by turning off some of these filters. I've got a preset I built for myself already. It just turns off all the grid and the horizon, etc. So what do we want now? Well, moving into the pyro, bunch of things I want to do. Let's say that they're not emitting from the surface. I want it to be the volume of the spheres. And yes, we're emitting density. Let's step through this pretty carefully. What I'm going to say is I, yes, want density, which is pretty much the smoke. I don't want any temperature. So we'll turn off temperature, which means it is shooting out density, but no fire. Hitting play. Let's see what we get. There we go. Nice streaks of smoke already working quite nicely. We could visually hide the cloner here, and now we'll see those burst away. So very pleased with that shape already. So let's let it play through a little bit and get some extra thoughts here. One I have is you see those are fading out very quickly, kind of like smoke, which works well, but I think I want those to live for longer. Also, let's look at a bit of reference imagery. You see how we kind of get these tiny streaks, but they seem to get thinner as they fire further away. So my thought for something like that would be, let's activate the fuel here. So the thought is, let's say, yeah, this is spewing out fuel. These will be emitting like a gasoline type of thing. Turn that on. So yeah, lots of fuel's coming out here. But if we were to play right now, it's going to be firing out fuel, and it doesn't look any different. We need to set the combustion. There's no fire, which means the fuel's not catching on fire. So into our pyro output, which I'll move down to the bottom just to keep these close together. Let's go track down some of the settings that we need here. Scrolling down, let's go find, we've got our dissipation. Maybe we want the smoke to disappear. We don't want it to disappear anywhere near as quickly. So say, hey, our dissipation will only be 1% each frame. So the trails should last longer. But I still want to be expanding and maybe even creating more. So we'll find that under our combustion. So currently our ignition temperature is 10, which means that's where we need the fire. It can't catch fire unless it gets a certain temperature. But I'm going to say, no. That is going to be at the minimum. So I'm going to say ignition temperature of -1. If you drag your slider all the way back, you can say -1, which means always burn all fuel all the time. So if we were to hit play here, it's going to reintroduce fire where you got a bunch of fuel. So I'm going to say, no. When the fuel burns, it doesn't create any temperature, which means it's not going to be lighting a fire anymore. So if I hit play again, now we're going to see that we're getting a giant burst of really thick smoke. So already working well. It's expanding outward. That's happening because of our pressure. So I'm going to say, yes, I like that, but I want a little bit less. So, maybe 0.25. Let's see how that looks. How much is it expanding? It's expanding a little bit, but not too much. So I like that. And then there's a lot of density here. So I'm going to try 0.1. Really, really thin density because it's going to be constantly adding that in. At a glance, that's still pretty thick. I'm going to drop this by 0.01. Let's see how that looks. And now we'll see that, yeah, we're getting a nice fluffy trail, but the trail is being maintained more. So a constant trail of fuel. So I'm digging that. That's looking really nice. And maybe it would be nice to add a little bit of random noise in. We've already got some default noise, but I'm going to crank that contrast back up again just to get lots of variation as it's being created. So yeah, that's pulling out. So I like the look of that overall, but our resolution isn't super high. So let's move into our output, scroll all the way to the top, and here's our voxel size. That's like the primary setting for controlling how detailed it's going to be. Now, of course, as we add in more or smaller voxels, it's going to make things go a lot slower. Keep in mind, chopping your voxel size in half means you're actually cubing it. So it's going to be, if I type in half the number, it's actually times 2 times 2 times 2 the amount of calculation time. So hitting play now, we should get a decent amount more detail. Yeah, you definitely see that there's smaller, more detail. The smaller turbulence is looking nice, kind of giving a slightly dusty effect. But let's start getting some color in here. So my thought is, we've got those original spears flying away. Let's get color fed onto those. So to keep this organized, let's say this random is actually dot position. So it's controlling our position. And I want to make a new, let's make a plane effector and name that dot color. Now I want to have very precise control over what colors these are, which is why I'm not using random. So let's say, don't use the position, but I would like to use the fields color. So let's move into fields and create from the middle drop down, which are the field layers. I'll create a step. So that means each one of these is getting incremented upward. And what's nice about that is I can say, hey, move into color remap and set that to a gradient. Changing this gradient to a preset. I'll take on the looping one. So here we're going from blue to blue. So double clicking there. One thing I've noticed is Pyro green tends to disappear a little bit in Pyro. So I'm going to click another dot in green, right click and say distribute not. So there's just a little extra green in there. Okay, excellent. So If I were to hit play right now, it's not going to work. If I hit play, you see that those are not colorful, and that's because we need to activate this color setting saying, hey, the step is outputting its color information. So yeah, those spheres are now colorful, but if I hit play, it doesn't have any effect. So here is my actual favorite new setting inside of Pyro. If we move into our Pyro tag, we're going to see that under color, there's color enable, and now there's a little twirl down. That's the one setting. And inside here, we can now feed vertex maps, or even better, color vertex maps. So let's make that vertex map. So we right click on our cloner, which is crazy already that we're putting this directly onto a cloner, because now, of course, we have our color vertex maps. So creating that, it's already using the fields. What should it be referencing? Well, it should be referencing the cloner itself. I want to view it as a MoGraph object because that's going to enable us to take on the color from those objects. The instant that I made that, you'll now see that each of those has taken on the vertex color of whatever the cloner was making those individual spheres. So now that we have that, moving back into the Pyro tag, I'll drag our color map inside, and now rewinding and hitting play, hopefully we're going to see lovely colors flying out individually from each sphere. So very pleased with that right out of the gate. Now tweaking a couple more things, let's hide that cloner. And you'll see that's actually very dark right now. These are very dense clouds. Now we could definitely pull back on the density, but another thing here is just that this is supposed to be acting as smoke, so it's absorbing a lot of color. Moving into the Pyro object, scrolling all the way down to the bottom, something we can say is, here's our absorption coefficient. So if I start pulling that down a bit, you can see that's going to be absorbing less light. So yeah, pulling this down, you can suddenly see if I pull it all the way down, this becomes very flat. Well, we probably don't want to go that far, but yeah, like a 0.1, 0.2, we can definitely still see this getting colorized a little bit, but it just is brighter overall. And of course, lighting would have a lot to do with that as well. But yeah, look at this beautiful burst of color that we're getting. Now, between the Pyro output and the Pyro tag, there are so many different settings that we could be tweaking and playing around here, but this is the meat of what I wanted to talk about. Why don't we look at the next little tweak inside of Pyro, and that is going to be under Simulate Forces, we can now use the destructor on the Pyro. So let's scoot, right now it is going to, and this didn't work before, if we make this way bigger, anything that if I rewind and hit play, anything that collides with this destructor now is just going to kill off the Pyro particles. They just completely go away. There's nothing there. Now you see that they can still exist on the outside, but there's also, pretty neat, if I were to move this directly onto our main shape, there's now a checkbox saying invert for Pyro, essentially meaning we are trapping the simulation inside of this box. Because Pyro as a system isn't in a bounding box, it could kind of escape and go crazy and go all over your scene. But in this case, we can say, okay, we know, let's say that our shot is pretty zoomed up. I could make that a little bit bigger, but for our example, I'll leave this relatively small. We could be like, oh, we're framed up here, so everything flying on the outside would just be slowing us down. So by doing something like this, if we hit rewind and play, we'll get that same beautiful explosion, but then it's going to collide with the box and just terminate. So no new particles are being created on the outside, which means the simulation won't take any longer to render. And actually filling up that volume by itself looks kind of cool. Now we could spend all day playing around with the scene file, going deeper and deeper. Obviously, Pyro has a lot of settings between the Pyro object and the Pyro output. And that is what I did in my own free time. So I'm going to pop open my own scene file. Temporarily, I'll delete off this Pyro tag and hit play and show you that I went a little bit extra crazy where I actually took each of those spheres, broke them apart into their own Voronoi fractured chunks, meaning that as it explodes outward, that each of those pieces drift away. And the goal there would be, if we go back to like this reference, that we might see multiple spikes of orange flying out or multiple spikes of this teal color. So that's what I was aiming for. So if I were to rewind and hit undo, bring back our Pyro tag, I'm gonna send this out to the viewport renderer. And I got the settings cranked up pretty high, so we definitely can't play it back in the viewport, but this shouldn't take too long. Oh, one really, really important thing to note is you want to make sure that you tell your Pyro output not to show up in your viewport when you're doing this viewport render, because otherwise it's going to show like some voxel chunks that just don't look good. So anyway, let's send this out to the viewport and see what we've got. There we go. Let's take a look. So yeah, here I've got the settings cranked up. Of course, there's so many different things you could tweak and play and art direct. So a lot of fun, but I really love playing with these colorized bits of smoke density inside of Pyro. So much fun. I really enjoy playing with it. It's worth mentioning that I'm going to be uploading this scene file onto my Patreon if you're supporting there. So if you want to get access to this more fancy version, then that will be available. Let's look at that one more time. So fun. So let's move on. Actually, I think that completes all of our Pyro stuff. So we get to move on to the last big topic, which is changes to the nodes. Close down all of these files here. No, 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 no. And now we've got a huge amount of changes in the world of nodes. So to begin with, I'm going to pop open this file, switch over to our node view. And the first thing you're going to see, basic stuff, this is what we're used to. So we've got our scene root. Typically, the first thing you would do is feed a child out here. So maybe we search for the word cube, double click, we've got a cube, and we'd have to output that. But it wouldn't let you in the past connect that as a child because it needs a geometry op for it. But now it'll automatically do that for you, and you see that's automatically created. Now, if you want to add a second child in, let's say we just duplicate this, and I could select the cube and say, okay, we're going to output 2 cubes. We would have to move into the scene root and say, hey, add another child, and now we could add another cube, or maybe search for the word cone, and now we could have a cone in there, connect that instead, and make it a little bit taller so we can see both of them intersecting. So yeah, now we're outputting both of those objects, but something that's pretty handy is inside of anything that's got an array. So in this case, this has an array. An array is just like a list here. So you can see adding children, removing children. But now if I mouse over it, I can hit plus and I can say, give me another, or you can say delete, 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 delete. This also counts for regular arrays. So if I search for the word build, I can build an array. As soon as we set our data type, let's say that this is a list of bools, so true or falses. So I can say actually delete, 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 or give me another more. So easy to add those. Very, very nice, simple interface to control that. Now, actually, hit undo, keep that in here. Something else you'll probably notice right away is, look, these nodes all have different colors assigned to them. So these are now color-coded. Their headers are, which adds just so much information for while you're working on nodes. So there's a bunch of different types of colors. We see a bunch of them here. So we've got, if we move into our nodes inside this assets browser, we can go inside our geometry primitives, and geometry is always blue. So here's our blue splines and our blue bits of geometry. So here is a primitive cylinder, but here is a primitive cycloid or a primitive arc, and all of them come in as blue. So lovely right there. Then we've got geometry modifiers and generators and also selections. And all of those are going to be orange now. So if I drag in a dissolve, or if I drag in our new electric spline modifier, you're going to see that those are all coming in as orange, as well as I said, all of the selections. So let's do an invert selection. All those come in as orange. Everything involved in making arrays or lists of items, which can be found under data structures, these are all now going to be yellow. Under fields, if we drag in any field information, those are going to come in as this purpley pink. Effectors, or more like deformers, if we drag that in, they kind of come in as this light purple. Distributions, which are different layouts of information. So things like a radial or a spiral, they come in as this red purple color. And finally, I think the way it's categorized is things that interact with other external parts of Cinema. So like this scene root, or if you go under asset construction, you can see that we have like packages or stack operations or children operations, or even if we make a new cube and drag this in from the object manager, all of that's going to come in as green. So it means we're kind of interacting outside of the context of nodes. But that's not all. We're getting more information as well from the ports themselves. So you can see here that we made a array earlier of bools, and now all of those bools coming in are green. It's like, okay, that's new. Before, all the ports used to just be gray. So I actually opened up this file because I already made this mesh primitive where I made one of each of the main data types, and you can see all the different colors. So an integer or a whole number is coming in as this dark gray, which is going to be very common, and float is a light gray, probably the most common. But then bools are green. Anything that's a vector is purple. color will be yellow, strings are light blue, matrices are purple, and geometry is going to be orange. So again, we're very, very quickly getting that information. It just makes it so much easier to work with, know what kind of information is being output or what kind of information it is expecting. Continuing that idea, there's also a couple of different shapes that these ports can take. Here you see the main ones where we get circles. These are just nice straight up information. But then we have things that are involved in op streams. So things like geometry are going to be feeding through an op stream. And then a very useful one you'll see in this array that is actually outputting, oh, here's a series of bits of raw bool information, but then it's outputting a list of them. It's an array of them. So now you get this nice little grid. So with that being a list of information, it's like, well, what type of information is it? Well, this is green, which means, hey, we know that bools are green. If we change this array type to be a vector, we found out already that that is purple. So I change it there. Now I know that array is outputting purple. Even if I collapse this down, I know what's being output. Now I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because it's a little bit more advanced when it comes to node stuff, but anything involving ranges or scope is going to also have its own icon. So let's search for a loop, and here's a loop carried value. And you're going to see that we've also got this little arrow shape where we get a dot, dot, dot. So this is all about opening a scope and kind of closing a scope. So if we were to search also for a range, you can see that that's now opening a range, saying like, hey, output from 0 to 10. And now that will be fed into this one, making it clear what things should be connected. Another detail to check out here is, let's move back over to our cube. In an older version of nodes, if you were to search for the word cube, you'd be seeing a bunch of different words cube, or maybe there'd be two. You'd be seeing multiple copies of cube, but now they've been merged down into one object. So here's one type of cube. Let's delink that. And if I were to select it, I can right click, and now there is a toggle node type where it's going to switch it to the other type. So now it has an op and the children and a local matrix. So like instead of just the raw information of a cube, it's now a full-on cube object. Before it kind of muddied the water where you didn't know which one you had. And now it's both, and you can just swap between them by saying toggle. And finally, something really small, but I think handy, is when you collapse this down further, we get this little hamburger icon. If we collapse it down to a simplified mode and then a very simplified mode, you see it gets very small, but we still maintain that color so we know exactly what type of node that is. Let's open a brand new file here and go to the standard view. Now, if you're just getting into nodes, you never played around with them, what I suggest you do as a way of playing around would be to start by making some sort of primitive. So let's go into our asset browser. We're already inside of nodes. And if you go into your asset construction, you can drag in something like a geometry modifier or a mesh primitive or a spline primitive. So in this case, I'll drag in a spline primitive directly into the object manager. So what's great about this is you don't have to live in that world of changing your whole interface. You've now got this as a standalone little spline primitive. Nothing's being returned though. So if you want to work on it, all you have to do is double click on the icon and it's going to pop open a simplified node editor. And you can see very simple here, not overwhelming. It just wants geometry. What is it going to output? So in this case, we could say, okay, well, let's search for the word text, find a text spline and let that come in. And there you can see already text is outputting geometry. So I'll move this down a little bit so we can see it. And let's just link one to the other. And instantly we get a text spline appearing, but we're using nodes to do it. Now, obviously, we already have a text spline primitive in Cinema, so you can add additional features onto this in order to make it more interesting to use. So let's double click and find a dash. So the dash spline modifier is something that Rocket Lasso made, which should be shipping with all subscriptions of Cinema 4D. And if we double click on that, you're going to see it's going to create a dash spline modifier. If we now feed the geometry into that and output its modified version, you'll see we get a dashed spline from it. So that's working quite nicely, and you've now got a modified version of that spline. Something that you might not have noticed, but is very handy and is different, is if I were to double click anywhere, wherever I double clicked to pop open the commander, if we search for a node, so in this case I'm going to search for the word trim and make a trim spline, you see it actually gets created at the location that I double clicked, which is pretty handy. Before they would all pile up in the dead center of the screen. So I find this very, very handy. Now, in case you haven't played with capsules much at all, if we want to make this a little bit more practical, why don't we bring in let's search for the word spline, and we're going to find scroll down, and we'll find a tessellate spline, which is pretty important. We're going to take this raw information of the spline and essentially interpret it. So here is the interpretation of it. So now you'll see we get the nice rounded out version. And then in our spline primitive, we have to make sure to tell this to be an open spline so we don't get these closed corners. But now if you want to start making this controllable for yourself, we can select any of these items and promote any property to be a primary control for you. So let's go to the text here and hold down Control as I click on the text spline, and now you can see that this port has been promoted. If I drag that out, I can say, hey, add a new input that's going to be promoted to the resource editor. And if I select our spline primitive group, we should go to Object, and now you can see we have a text spline. So we can type in 2023.2. and the text will modify to that. So any setting that we want to promote, we can go into the dash spline modifier and say, what's the length of the dash? Hold down Control, promote that, drag this out, say, yeah, add it as a new setting. And now we get the length of the dash. You could always rename that. So say that this is now dash length. We've now promoted that. So now we've got both of those settings exposed. We can change the dash length and the text, and we've made a new primitive for ourselves. Another neat addition to the node editor, though, and I think a lot of people are going to be glad that this is here. Let's expand this a bit bigger. Is we now can open up a left panel and a right panel. So if I open up this right panel, we're going to see that we can see the attributes of whatever I select over here. We don't have to go to the attribute manager. And if we open up this left panel, we can now get access to an asset browser specifically looking at the nodes. So this could always be, just think of the workflow now where it's like I can double click, get this node window, maximize it, and we can view the left and right panel, have all the information that we need to work from this. But where it might be even more useful for people is we can close this down. I'm already using Redshift as my renderer. So if I go in and make a brand new material for myself, double click to pop that open, we can do the same thing here. So if I maximize that window, I can say, hey, give me a left panel for all of the different nodes I could be playing around with. And I can say, also open up our right panel to give me the data. So both of those live inside of this window, which I think is a really nice workflow. Continuing with nodes, let's do something a little bit more advanced. So let's close that down, open up another new file. And in this case, I think let's open up the nodes, and I will search for the new electric spline modifier. So moving inside here, it should have shipped recently. I'll drag this in, hide the asset browser. And what I'd like to do is say, edit this asset as a group, which enables for a lot of nodes for you to go inside of it and see everything that's making it up. So yeah, look at all these different nodes. So let's make sure that this is actually outputting something. So keep it simple, search for another, let's do a circle spline. Circle spline into geometry, out as a child, so it's actually in the scene, so that's working fine. If I play, you can see it's wiggling around with some electricity. We'll talk about some more of those settings in a little bit. But let's go back inside here and talk about some more advanced workflow tools. So let's zoom in, and actually, while we're zoomed out, something that's pretty handy is you can actually see the colors of the different nodes already right here in the zoomed out view. So let's say, oh, I know I need to find a distribution. Well, we know that the distributions are that red color. So there's a couple right there. It's like, oh, okay, there is my spline step that I was looking for. So it can be really handy even zoomed out seeing the different colors. But I'm going to go over here into this big old group that we've got. Going inside there, we can see that there's a lot of nodes inside of that group. Inside of here, you can see there's another group called noise offset. Inside of this group, there's something called loop circle movement. And now look how deep we've gone inside of these nodes. But what's nice now is we always had this interface where we could jump back to any layer, but now it doesn't forget where you had traveled. So I might zoom all the way out, change something, and then zoom back in again to any level that I want. So this is called breadcrumb trail. So we're able to zoom in and out really, really quickly. So that's pretty handy right there. Next up are a couple of features that Rocket Lasso had been specifically requesting. And that is the ability to duplicate a node, which we could already do. But if you hold down Shift, it'll duplicate all of the wires that were connecting it. There were so many different things that we were doing that we'd be having connection after connection after connection. And when you're in, say, this super zoomed out view here, and you're modifying this node where there's, let me delete this mid port right there. So you can see this is connected, but it's connected how far away? It's like we'd have to zoom out and move and move and move and move until we finally see that, yes, it's connected to displacement. So the ability to be like, hey, I want to duplicate this node and actually keep the wires with it means we didn't have to travel all the way to find it. In addition to that, though, if I were to delete those connections, something that's really handy, and another request that we had, if I have a wire and I just know that's connected to displacement and I need a copy of it, I don't want to go traveling and finding it, I can just grab this node, hold down Control, and make a duplicate of that particular wire. So that, just by itself, is saving a ton of time. Zooming out a bit, we can also now select a node and then right-click on it, and we get some new options. One is select all the connected nodes. So everything that's directly connected to it will now be selected. But we can also say, hey, select all of the upstream nodes. So every node that you see highlighted here is all in some way feeding into the node I had selected. So all this node that we have selected is in some way dependent on every single one of those. Zooming in, we can also say, hey, I want to select all of the downstream nodes. So now you can see everything that is selected is somehow dependent on the node I just had selected. So both of those are very, very useful. If you have a node that has a lot of connections and you need to break all of those, you can now right click and say disconnect, and now every single connection has been removed. So that can definitely save you some time. But the next thing I want to show is something that I really love. Zooming all the way out, let's go into this debug dropdown and enable heat map. What this is going to do is show you how much time different nodes are taking to calculate. And this is actually really important, especially for some sort of power user. And I guess in this case, especially for Rocket Lasso, who's trying to make tools for artists, we can now see what is slowing down a tool. And this has actually helped us dramatically increase the speed of the last couple of nodes that we've been making. So here you can see that the circle is taking 0.02 and the scene root is taking 0.02. But 99% of all the calculation time is happening inside of the geometry modifier group for this electric spline. Not surprising, that's where everything's happening. So let's move inside of that node. And now we can see that, yeah, inside of this node, if we zoom out, lots of these are blue. Blue means that, hey, not much is going on there. They're pretty much a static number, or they're not having to update at all. But if we zoom in, we can see there's a couple nodes that are actually doing something. This node here, which is eventually combining all the segments, is taking up 17%. And the red one, that one's eating up 63%. So now we can go inside that node and be like, okay, cool. Now, how much is this one eating up? And you see a bunch of these are blue, not taking up much. And I think these other ones, these are completely static numbers. So those aren't modifying at all. The blue ones are very light, just taking up very small portions of the calculation time. But here you can see that the lion's share is eaten up by these 3 green nodes. And each of them is about 20%. And you'll see it's actually 3 noise nodes because we're sampling noise on X, Y, and Z in order to create this lightning effect. And at this point, we're at a baseline cinema node, so we can't go any deeper. We can't speed it up. That's just where the calculation time is taking. Now, having said that, keep in mind that these are percentage based. So this isn't about how much time this is taking. It's just that compared to a subtract, this noise sample is relatively slow. We've been able to go and redesign entire chunks of our tools to be able to speed them up by avoiding particular like data structures that might be slower than they would be otherwise if we did it a different way. Now, under debug, there's also a heat map relative mode. If I change that, you're going to see these numbers have actually jumped up a bit. The reason they jumped up is because now this is showing 100% as tallied up just in the screen that I'm currently looking at. This now equals 100%. But when I have this not in relative mode, then this is now absolute. This is 20% of all the calculation time in the entire scene. No matter how zoomed in or how zoomed out we are, that is eating up 20% of the time. Next, we've got some lovely updates to the port inspector and the data inspector. Moving back inside, I'll go all the way to the end here. Let's turn off that heat map and zoom in and say, okay, at the very end of this, we're eventually outputting some geometry. If I want to get some information out of this, I could right click and say, show me the port. So one thing that's nice right away is it's giving us a bunch of information, but I can just click this little X and get rid of it instead of right clicking and removing it. But then we've also got the all-important data inspector, which is going to tell you all of the information that's actually coming out from that port. Now, if you don't know, you have to make sure that whatever port you're checking is actually plugged into the eventual output. Otherwise, it's not being calculated. If it's always calculating, then obviously there'd be a massive de-optimization. But let's right click on this final output and say, hey, show me the data inspector. Now you're going to see a giant list of all these different geometry objects because we're spitting out a whole bunch of different pieces of geometry. But if I select any one of those, we're going to be getting lots of information about exactly what that's doing. So with this piece of geometry, I can say, hey, I would like to see the points, or I would like to see, well, there are no polygons here. We can see the polygons, and we can see the UVs, and we can see the vertex UVs from it. And, you know, there's all the information you might need, and we can individually break it down. So just way better way of seeing this information. In addition to that, it's definitely a problem we used to have, is when we have hundreds and thousands of nodes making up something, we might do a bunch of different data inspectors where it's like, oh, I also want to see the data from here, and I also want to see the data from here. And each of those data inspectors, we can now quickly move between each of them. They'll all be listed out, which is incredibly handy. Before, we'd have to go through our entire hierarchy being like, wait, there's a data inspector here somewhere, and I want to close it, because I think they do take a little bit of calculation time. So now, instead of tracking it down and manually deleting it, we can move to it and say delete. And we can grab this one and say delete, delete, delete. And now I've gotten rid of all of them in the scene, and I don't have to go tracking them all down. Now, the last node workflow tool that has been implemented here is pretty handy. Let's go and make any node. I'll just make a new build node. And let's say that all the time I am making a build full of vectors. So I'll say, hey, I want this to be a vector. And you see it makes 4 of them. I'll be like, no, I don't need the 4. I'm just going to be feeding my own stuff in manually via the other nodes. So I'm going to be using this thing all the time. So what I can do now is actually save this as a preset. So I can say save preset, and I'll say build, and I'll just say build vector. So for me, I know whenever I'm building an array and I'm using vectors, I already know it's going to be empty. So that's fine for me. Typically, you'd want to be saving into your preferences or wherever you are wanting to save this, but I'm going to keep it clean and save into my scene file. So that isn't real for me. So now if I create a brand new build, bring this in, I can select it and say, hey, give me my preset of build vector. And now you see it sets vector and it's an empty array. But even better, I can double click and search for the word build vector. And as long as I have presets selected, you can see, hey, here's one of my presets. I can drag that in and automatically it's got that preset applied to it and it's ready to be used. But let's make this even more usable for your average artist. Let's go to a brand new scene file and go to a regular view. And let's create a text spline again. And I'll bring in that new electric spline modifier. So I'll grab this, drag it in. Again, worth mentioning that this is for Maxon 1 subscribers, this particular one. Different Rocket Lasso assets are for regular subscribers or Maxon 1 subscribers. Like I said, if it wasn't for the subscriptions, we wouldn't be able to make these at all. So it does kind of make these a bonus. Searching for the word Rocket Lasso. You'll see a bunch of these are made just for vanilla subscriptions for Cinema 4D, and these are for Maxon 1. And there's also a bunch of bonus scene files showing examples of how to use these. But anyway, talking about the presets some more, these can now be applied to capsules as well. So here's my electric spline modifier. If I play, we get some nice electricity moving around. But by default, the electric spline modifier is expecting an open spline, and it does a bunch of cool things. And also expect a full video on this in the future. So let's change our text, set it to the middle. So you can see it's expecting an open spline. So this would look a lot better, I think, if we go down to the start and end and we say, hey, don't fade out, and blend between the start and the end. And now you can see it looks nice for a closed spline. So in this case, how about I say, that's looking good. I would like to make this a new preset. So I'll save new preset, and I'll just say electric spline modifier closed. Save that into, in this case for me, the scene file. And now that preset has been saved. But let's modify this into a completely different look. I'll change this to be a purlin noise instead. Let's change the noise frequency. I'll crank this up a whole bunch here and then shrink down our displacement. If I hit play, we can see this moving around. I would like that to be way faster, so let's say 1000%. And there we go. That'll be a new preset. I'll save that as electric spline modifier squiggle closed and say OK. And now, if I were to make a brand new, let's delete that. We can now do a commander and search for the electric spline again. Drop it as a child. Select the drop down for the presets, and we can say, hey, give me the squiggle preset. Instantly applied, ready to go. But again, even better, we can search in the commander for squiggle. There's probably not too many things called squiggle. And there's the preset for the electric modifier squiggle closed. Bring that in, and it's already got the preset applied, ready to go. So we're also going to be able to ship some of the capsules with presets already built in. So we might have a bunch of cool looks ready to go in future tools. So very exciting to have this preset ability just for artists to do it, but also for us to be able to ship tools that have those presets built in as well. The very last thing to talk about is just a couple of new nodes, which are pretty powerful. So let's open up this scene file. I've got a spline primitive. Double clicking on that, you'll see I've got a text spline fed into a geometry axis, which just takes all of these points and puts them in the center of the axis. And then we've got our new string nodes. Strings is just code terminology for text. This is just text strings. So let's connect our random string generator to our text, and instantly you can see we're getting random gibberish across. So a random string generator. Selecting it, you can see that this is outputting a length of characters. And it's outputting a seed, so we can randomize that seed, get different outputs. And it is currently seeing every lowercase letter, uppercase, number, and symbol. But we can say, hey, only show us symbols. And there's just gibberish of symbols. Show us just random numbers. We can choose different random numbers, which could be pretty useful. Turn that off, say uppercase and uppercase letters. So, pretty straightforward, random string generator. Next up is the random string from source. So you can see by default, it's actually creating all the lowercase, uppercase letters, numbers, and gibberish, all the characters, symbols rather. So connecting that's going to give us pretty much an identical output, but here we can type in whatever we like. So I could type in 2023.2, and it's going to be randomly returning just those characters, and we can randomize the seed and get completely different outputs of whatever length that we want. Next up, we have a join spline. This one is a little bit more complicated in the fact that it's looking for an array. So we already learned a little bit about arrays. Let's make two different random strings. Call this one Cinema 4D. And if I were to output that one, we can see what that's outputting. So yeah, just randomized characters for Cinema 4D. So if we want to join these together, we have to feed them into an array. So double clicking, let's say we want to build an array. So here is an empty array. What are we going to fill it with? Well, we're going to fill it with strings. And here's all the elements. I'll delete two of those, feed in the first result, feed in the second, and now we're outputting a list of strings. Feed that into the string join, output that as the final. Now you can see that those have been concatenated, they've been combined, and we can see the combination of those two. The join also allows you to put like something in between where those are getting merged. So if I put a space, you'll see a space. Put two spaces, you'll get two spaces. So any kind of combination you want, and you can feed in as many into this build as we wanted to. We could add this random string generator, put another element into that list, and also combine that one. And again, it'll put two spaces and then that random text. Okay, so that is our join. Next up is split. So here's our random string generator. Let's feed that in. And I've already got connected to a couple of things. Let's see what and the reason I'm doing that is we're now feeding in the random string generator, and it's outputting, you'll see it's outputting an array. Actually, we can output that as an array into the text spline, but you're going to see that we're actually seeing it as a array is displayed in code, which is we got a bracket, we've got commas separating things, and then a close bracket. Well, if we click the split, we can decide what is going to create the split. Actually, by default, if I say reset to default, it's empty. So you can see I can type in whatever I want. I can say I want to break it every time we see the letter G. So if I type in G, every time it sees a G, then now it puts a comma there instead. So we're breaking at the G. So having done that, we could, as a list, say, show me just the element. We can see the first element or the second element, but we can also get the count here. So how many elements are in the list? There are 3. If I randomize the string to a different seed, you can see this is how many, essentially this is telling us how many times the letter G appears in there. So there could be a bunch of use cases for that. Next up, we've got, let's grab this 2022, output that. So you can see we're getting this current string, and I'll say, hey, repeat that. And I want to repeat it 2 times. Output the result, and we'll get it exactly twice. Pretty straightforward. We can now reverse that string. So let's make a constant. So I'll search for constant. It's probably actually value. So I'll search for value, say that this value is actually a string, and again, we can type in Cinema 4D and say reverse that and get the reverse spline, and it flips it backwards. And then we have strip white space. So if we feed that in instead, it's going to Well, let's select it. You can see there's a couple options. It will remove empty spaces from the beginning, from the end, from the start and the end, or all of them. So a nice simple way of stripping out extra spaces. And keep in mind, all of these can be combined in different ways, so you can get more information or combine text in lots of useful different ways. But now let's move on to the last node and the last thing that we will be talking about. And that is going to be, let's make a new file here. And that is going to be the closest points node. So for this one, let's go into the actual node, the scene node layout, and start to output things. What I'd like to do is let's make a sphere in the object manager and make it a little bit smaller. We'll make it 10 so we can actually see it. And in our scene, I would like to be outputting something that we can see. Let's make a landscape. So I'll search for landscape. There's the landscape primitive. And I'll say, hey, output that into the scene. Automatically, it makes that geometry op that we talked about earlier, which is handy. And you can see that it's pretty low poly. So let's say, okay, landscape, be 55 by 55 and be way taller. Excellent. So we got this landscape. Grab our sphere, pull this up into the air so we can see everything. Excellent. Now, we're going to talk about the new node, which is closest points. Double-clicking, creating this. It is going to be looking for some geometry, and it wants a position. What this is going to do is a very powerful coding algorithm called the KD tree, and it's just a very fast way of finding the closest point. So in this case, it's going to be really useful for people making more advanced tools. So it's going to be really useful for Rocket Lasso to make tools that will be useful for people. But let's do a couple of quick examples here of ways you might be able to play with it right now. So having said that, this is looking for geometry. So I'll say, okay, that's the geometry we're looking for. Now it wants a position. Well, the position, let's say we want to get that from our sphere. So I'll drag that in and you see we get all this extra information. But all that we really want is the global matrix. So what is this actually outputting? Well, it is going to take the position. So let's get our global matrix. And it's going to be trying to find a point within this distance, within 100. But you know what? I'm going to say, really big distance. It's searching everywhere. And it's going to try and find the closest single point. Okay, all this is doing now is outputting the index of that point. Not the position, but the index. So we actually need to get the vector, the position, so the XYZ, in order to make this output something. So I think the way I'll do that is let's search for a property, and here's a geometry property get. So what geometry do I want? Well, I want the geometry of the landscape. And what do we want to get? I would like to get the 3D points from it. Thank you very much. So that's going to be outputting all of the vectors, but in order to get access to it, we need to get the element. It's giving us an array. So get element is a way of saying, hey, give me just one of whatever you're outputting. So the array is all of this position information. The index will be whatever this closest point is outputting. So if I feed that through, this is going to iterate the collection because this is an entire list. Now, even though it's a list of one, it's still a list. So this is just going to automatically interpret for us and give us that one. So this should now be outputting a position information. So all that work, it's giving us a position in space. So how do we make this real? Well, let's make this a spline. So let's search for the word assemble, because that is going to enable us to assemble a spline. Double clicking that. What do we want to connect? Well, all we need to do is feed in some points. So let's build. It wants an array, so we need to build an array. Double clicking. Let's build an array. It's an array of what? Positions, which will be a vector. So here's a bunch of elements. I don't want all of these elements, so delete 2 of them. So what's the first position that we actually want to go? Well, I want to connect from wherever the sphere is. So that is the global matrix. I'll connect that over as the first element. I'll move this up so those lines aren't quite intersecting each other so much. And let's collapse that down. I don't need to see all that info. And then the second one is whatever position this get element is outputting. So I'll feed that through as well. So now that that's happening, we have an array that we can feed out to the assemble spline. And with any luck, that's going to be creating a spline for us. So let's output this also into our scene. So under the scene root, I'll say, give us another object to return. And I'll connect that. And with any luck, excellent. You see it created a geometry op for us automatically. Lovely. And we get a single line connecting that sphere, and it's connecting to its closest possible point. So grabbing that sphere and moving around, you'll see it'll constantly jump to whichever point is closest. So there's probably a lot of use cases for that where you can get exactly that point. But it doesn't stop there. If we go to the closest points, we can say, hey, don't give us just the single closest point. Give us 2 of the closest points. Give us 3. And I can keep on cranking this number up, and we can get all, now we're getting 33 points that are connected to the sphere. Those are 33 closest. Moving this around, you can now see these connecting as I travel it around. So pretty powerful right there. Lots of neat use cases. And this is sort of I know we used a bunch of nodes and we're using some technical nodes here, but this is the straightforward setup. So that's pretty exciting. But let's do something a little bit fancier. I've got a scene file prepped to save us some time. So what do I got? Pretty much things we just built. So we've got a vector here, just like the sphere, but here I'm manually placing a 0, 0, 0, which is going into a list. So 2 elements. So connecting 0, 0 to, in this case, 55 by 55 by 55, making a single spline line, which is getting output into the scene. And then I've got a matrix object here. If I hit play, you can see that's animating around, and a second matrix and a third matrix. So 3 different matrices for us to play around. So what if I say I would like to connect from 0, 0, 0 to all of the yellow matrix objects? So let's build that. To begin with, let's drag in our matrix object. What do we want to connect to? Well, let's search for our closest points. And I'd like to connect, what's the geometry? Well, the geometry is going to be this matrix array. So wherever those are. What position is it going to be referencing? Well, let's say we're starting from a 0 position. So let's connect to 0. This will now be outputting 1 connection that's within 100. But you know what? I'm going to crank this up to, let's even just do 10,000 to make sure we get everything. And I'll put this up to 20, which should definitely get all of those. So connect to the 20 closest of them. That should now be returning a list of all of the indexes. So as we did before, we need to get the element. So let's say get element. So that is the list of elements we want to get. Thank you for iterating the collection for me. And the list of all of that information comes also from that matrix. So hopefully this is now a list of positions. So we can replace this list, which is just 55, and replace that with this list. So now you can instantly see that it's connected our 0 all to these matrix positions. Hitting play, you'll see that those are actually staying connected even as it moves around. And yeah, it looks like even like if we lessen the distance here, actually we could see them drifting in and out. I don't know what the range is. Yeah, by going a little smaller, you see that now it's only the ones that are close enough are making those connections. And we could increase or decrease a count where we're only getting up to 5. So even just with this node is pretty powerful. But let's move to the next step. And it's actually not that much more complicated to make this way more powerful. So let's scoot this to give us a little bit more room and say, hey, give me that second matrix. So we want to do pretty much the exact same thing. Let's do it mostly from scratch. I'll just copy over this closest point. So you see that we're feeding our matrix in as the geometry. So let's do that again. But what position are we going to be referencing? Well, we could just say from the beginning, which means some of the blue would be connecting as well. But instead, let's say, hey, every one of these yellow that are outputting, every yellow that got connected, let's say that's a position we're referencing. So I'll drag that in as the position. So this is actually outputting how many? Let's see. This is actually outputting up to 20 as a list. So that's getting the closest points. We need to, again, get the element. The element will be from the matrix. These are the indexes that are fulfilling that criteria. And now let's also add this to our final build. So we'll add another element and connect it. And hopefully, as soon as I do, now a bunch of the blues have gotten connected to the yellows. Hitting play, and you can now see these nice instant dynamic connections being made by whatever rules we feed in here. So let's push it to the final logical conclusion here. Drag in that third matrix object, and we'll just copy this entire rig over. We need to connect our matrix to the geometry and the matrix to the get element. And we're referencing any of the blues that we're making a connection will be our position. So that's all we have to do to make another one. Let's add another element into our array right there. So now I'll make that connection. It's getting a little bit tiny, but good aim, was able to get it. Now we see every blue is now jumping to the nearest black matrix. So hitting play, we can see we've got lots of connections going all over the place. and everything filters through the system. If I say, hey, I only want the singular closest yellow, turn that on. Now, let's pause it so we can actually see. We should be getting one yellow. There's so many connections, it's actually still kind of hard to see. We can see that we are only connecting to a single yellow element, and that yellow element is going to, let's click this, the closest, mostly up to 20 closest blue elements, and then those blue are going to the closest black elements. So if I select these last two closest points and say, you know what, I only want you to make a single connection. So that should calm it way down. Now you see we get the closest, we got yellow, we got from 0 to yellow to blue to black. And we could increase the range on all of these. So let's say that I want all of these to pretty much connect no matter what. So we've got a single connection, always grabbing the single closest yellow, which filters down through the entire system. But we can say, okay, we've cleaned it up a little where these are only connecting to their singular nearest. So say, okay, give me the 2, give me 3, give me 4. So we can crank this up and connect to all the yellow, and now each of the yellow are jumping to the next closest one. Visually hiding these matrices, you can see we get this crazy animation making those connections. At any step of the way, we could be like, you know what, those blues, let's have it connect to the 2 closest, and now there'll be a split there where they're trying to find their 2 closest. Or we can keep on increasing that where just the outermost ones are making connections. But we can say, yeah, make a lot of connections, but only to things that are pretty close to you. So yeah, now you see occasionally it's suddenly making a bunch of connections. Let's say this one can make 2, but that will only go out to 100. So yeah, look at this, there's so much control here. And we just, when you look at this setup, not too complicated, and you just keep on repeating the concept and you see it loop and create something even more powerful. So yeah, that's looking pretty cool. I'm looking forward to the tools that Rocket Lasso will be able to make using that. It'll open up a lot more possibilities because it does run nice and quick. That will wrap up nodes and wrap up everything that is new in 2023.2. So that video was way longer than I was expecting it to be, but that always seems to be the case. You added new features inside of Cinema, and they just combine in so many new interesting ways that you could just talk about it forever. So thank you so much for watching. Just to recap, I'm going to be speaking at NAB. That's going to be really exciting. I am excited for that presentation. It's going to be a good one. Rocket Lasso Live Season 5 is back. So if you've got questions about Cinema 4D, you should definitely go and check that out. There'll be links in the description. And as always, if you want to support Rocket Lasso, the best way to do it is either support on Patreon, where you get access to videos early, or let's say the scene files from this episode. And also Rocket Lasso makes plugins for Cinema 4D. I showed off a couple in there, but we recently released the utility splines, which are really, really useful. So the best way to support us, of course, is to get a tool that makes your job even easier. But that's going to wrap this up. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching, and I'll see you next time in the live stream on the tutorial, or maybe at NAB. Bye-bye, everybody.